This podcast is sponsored by the Faraday Battery Challenge, which aims to support world-class scientific, technology development and manufacturing scale-up capability for batteries in the UK.
The challenge is focused on developing cost-effective, high-performance, durable, safe and recyclable batteries to support the EV market. If you want to find out more, make sure to go to www.faraday.ac.uk. Welcome to the See Me Be Me podcast. I'm Nile Henry.
And I'm Blair Henry.
And we're two brothers who set out on a mission to make motorsport and STEM careers more diverse, affordable, and inclusive. We are the founders of the Blair Project.
This podcast series delves into the minds of inspirational individuals who come from ordinary and often humble backgrounds, but through their belief, dogged determination, and never give up attitude, have managed to overcome academic, social, or mental challenges to achieve their dream careers.
Our guests will share their life lessons that you too can apply to your own. We hope their stories will inspire you to go further, aim higher, and accept nothing less than you deserve. Your ambition, your purpose is all within, and we're here to help you unlock it. The planet of possibilities are endless.
You know who made it.
So, on today's episode, we'll be speaking to Calum Nicholas, who is a senior power unit assembly technician at the Red Bull Racing Formula One team. Calum is an advocate for more accessible apprenticeships in STEM as a pathway for careers. Today, we'll also be discussing Calum's journey from starting his career in motorsports at the grassroots level to getting his first role in Formula One with the Marussia Formula One team in 2014, all the way to working with one of the most dominant teams on the Formula One grid today in Red Bull. We'll also be discussing pathways to get into careers with motorsport and how you can get involved. Now, without further ado, let's get straight into today's episode.
Welcome to the See Me Be Me podcast, Calum.
How you doing, mate? You all right?
No, good, thank you. So first, Calum, can you tell us, a bit about your background and your journey, how you got to where you are, and what you actually do?
As you know, I'm Calum Nicholas. I am the senior PU assembly technician at Red Bull Racing. I'm responsible for the build and service of all of our race and test installations, the ancillary systems, so cooling systems, pipe work, exhaust systems, all of that kind of stuff to do with the integration of the PU into the chassis. And a bit of planning in terms of service scheduling, build day planning, things like that, making sure they're built to the correct specification as well as within their service life and those sort of things there. I've been doing that now. Well, I've been in the F1 paddock now for about 11 years. I've been a Red Bull for the best part of 9 years. And that's me.
So when you say PU assembly, what does PU stand for?
Right, so the power unit. So all of the things related to the running of the engine in terms of the internal combustion engine. So all of the pipe work related to that engine, the exhaust systems, all the cooling systems, and all of that stuff. So it's all engine related stuff. On top of that, obviously, I'm also a member of the pit crew. So I do the wheel gun on the rear right. I've been doing that for a few years. I've done lots of other little jobs on the pit crew over the years.
So take me back to Calum growing up. Did you always envision that you'd end up working in motorsport and in Formula One, or what 6-year-old Calum? What did he dream of becoming?
Not really. I always liked cars, bikes, anything with an engine, anything that went fast. That was sort of me as a teenager. But I never really considered. I never considered it engineering to be a career. Not at that point in my life, to be honest. I went on, did A-levels. I got English and English literature and theatre studies. None of them were engineering related A-levels I did. And then when I left school, it wasn't until I sort of left school when I got an apprenticeship working in a local garage, where I sort of really just fell in love with cars, taking them apart, fixing them, working out how they worked. And it wasn't until I was 18 that the sort of the real obsession with cars began. And then it wasn't until I was like 20 that I had any interest in motorsport. You know, like I went to like the 2009, I went to the 2009 British Grand Prix, and it was sort of there that I sort of, you know, saw the guys on a Sunday morning doing their pit lane like pre-session checks and
Yeah.
doing pit stop practice. And it was sort of there that I walked down that pit lane doing the pit lane walk, and I sort of said, you know what, I'd quite like to do this as a career. So I was sort of a late starter, you know. By the time I'd enrolled, and then, you know, from there I went back to college.
Yeah.
I went back to college and got an apprenticeship, and it was sort of, you know, I was 2021 by that point nearly.
Yeah.
You know, so I was like a late starter. I always think of myself as a late starter. Like a lot of the guys I work with, you know, they've been in motorsport as either in their family or they'd been involved in motorsport in some way since they were quite young.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't for me. It wasn't. I mean, I think especially, you know, being in London, there's not a lot of places for you to sort of explore motorsport. You know, like when I was really young, we lived out in like Reading, and there were loads of like go-kart tracks and stuff you could do. I think once I moved into London as like a slightly older kid, there was way less around for you to do that stuff. Certainly at the time, I think now we've got a lot more facilities available than we did out then. But so there was no real push for me, you know, from that sort of perspective. No sort of nothing around my life for me to really engage with engineering. You know, until I'd left school, when I was out there in the world, and that was when I discovered what it was I really wanted to do.
And then you mentioned your interest in motorsport. Well, particularly engineering started in when you went to Silverstone back in 2009, and then it just built from almost like a passion. Or would you say it was like a hobby, and then you decided you really loved it so much that you wanted to make a career out of it, in a
Yeah,
sense?
do you know what it was? I was sort of at that point. I was at that point in my life where I didn't really have time to be doing something as a hobby. You know, I was at that point in my life where I had to sort of make decisions about what I was going to do with my life.
Yeah.
You know, so I think like once I decided that that was something I was going to do, I already knew that I wanted to continue working on cars.
Yeah.
But I think once I'd got to that point, I sort of said to myself, well, you know, if this is what you're going to pursue, you have to pursue it with everything. You know, there was no half measures. You know, I couldn't just, oh, have a look and see if I had to be like, right, if this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to do it. You know,
Yeah.
all of it as quickly as I can, get stuck in. So I think from that point on, it was sort of, I was quite driven. You know,
Nice.
like I do whatever it would take. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and then as you were like building yourself up, like from the grassroots in the world of motorsport, did you have like any like role models that were just pushing you, that extra bit further?
No, do you know what? So one of the things, and it's sort of, I guess, the same reason why I didn't take an interest when I was younger was because there was no real like representation. You know,
Yeah,
like I remember when I first decided that that was what I was going to do for a career, and I told my friends, and like when I told my white friends, it was like, oh, cool, you know, like wicked, that's going to be great. When I
yeah,
told my black friends, they were like, huh, are you joking? Like it was the assumption that this just wasn't a career that black people
yeah,
pursue. You know, like straight away, like that was the way, like their just instinctual view about it. They knew nothing about the sport, nothing about the industry, and I was in the same position. You know, I knew nothing about the sport, nothing about the industry, but I think to them, like there was sort of like this thing that it just wasn't a career that black
yeah,
people tended to pursue as engineering. You know, so it was quite weird for me to sort of be like, oh right, I'd never thought of that. You know, I'd never looked at it like that. It was just something that I'd just discovered, and I was so excited about. And then it wasn't till way later in my career when I actually sort of went back and I thought to myself, yeah, you know what? There was no representation. Like there was no one doing this job that looked like me.
yeah,
You know, and I can understand why people would be like, oh yeah, this is different. You know, like, whereas for me at the time, I guess I was kind of lucky that I never really thought about it. You know, it's only when I look back now and say, oh yeah, you know, there was no representation at that time. Like the paddocks that I've worked in, especially the ones I worked in early in my career,
yeah,
they were almost entirely like one demographic of people. They were like, you know, middle-aged to young middle-aged white men. You know, there were very few women, and there were very few women in technical roles. Obviously, we still have a lack of diversity of women in technical roles. But yeah, and even fewer black people, or you know, people from ethnic minorities. There were so few working in the paddock. You know, it probably wasn't until like 2015 where I worked with other black people as or ethnic minority people as my colleagues. It wasn't actually until I was well into my career in F1 that I actually had that, you know. So when I look back, when I was back in 2009, yeah, I look back and there was no one that looked like me doing it. And I guess I was just kind of lucky that I never really thought about it, you know. Like even at college, my time at college, there was one other black student in the college with me.
That's crazy.
Well,
I mean, go on now.
No, because I will admit it probably was back in 2019. You know, I was watching one of the Grand Prix, and then because I always just thought, you know what, the only person in Formula One who's of a person of color is just Lewis, and that's probably the way it's only going to be. And then one day, you know, I think Verstappen had pulled into the pits, and then I saw your face in the pits. And I was like, oh my god. You know what? We've got black people in the pit. Like this is fantastic.
This is the thing. Like especially now, like over the last few 3, 4, 5 years, the paddock has sort of naturally become a little bit more diverse, just because the reach of the sport has got bigger.
Yeah.
You know, so like you widen the pool of people who see the sport, you're naturally going to get, you know, more people from different ethnicities that are interested in it.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, when I started, it was literally Lewis. You know, Lewis was obviously just become he was just world champion when I first started thinking about racing. He was you know, world champion, and he was like the first time you'd ever seen involved in that sport. You know, a black figure who's at the pinnacle of the sport, winning, you know, succeeding. It was the first time you'd seen it. But yeah, in terms of mechanics, you know, team managers, stuff like that. Like there was no other representation. You know, if you wanted to be a race driver, that was great. You had this amazing role model, you know. But for everyone else who wanted to work in the sport, there was very few, you know. So I feel like sometimes I look now and I feel quite privileged if I can just provide that for someone else that wants to get involved.
That was going to be my next question, is like how does it, have you ever thought about that, the fact that you are obviously a trailblazer, but then also there are probably young kids who have been watching Formula One and may have seen your face in the pit lane and just thought, wow, if this individual can do it and he's working at Red Bull, you know, what's to stop me from, you know, from following my dream job of working in Formula One? So how does it feel to be like a role model or a trailblazer within the world of Formula One?
I think about it a lot. I guess the way it feels is just sort of, it's an honor. You know, like I try and do what I can. You know, I'm out here I'm just out here, you know, doing my job, chasing my own dreams. But if like you said, if I can sort of inspire just one person to think, oh, you know what, I might want to do that for a living, and they wouldn't have thought it before, then yeah, it's humbling. It's a great honor to consider that might be something that I could do.
Now, Calum, I wanted to speak to you about the beginning of like your Formula One career. I believe you started at Marussia Formula One team.
Yeah, it was.
2014. Now, how does it compare? Because what I remember about Marussia is like they were one of the teams that were like struggling like financially, and they were one of the teams who were, you know what, it's just they didn't have as much funding as, let's say, the teams like Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari.
Yeah.
So how does it compare working with a team that was at the lower end of the grid compared to where you are now, like Red Bull, where you're pretty much dominating races and whatnot, and it's more championship oriented?
Just in terms of like the infrastructure, it was like night and day. Like obviously, I remember when I first got the job at Marussia, I remember my first day and arriving at this, you know, nice looking factory with an F1 car in the lobby, and this is great, you know, this is Formula One. And then like I'll never forget, like 2 weeks in, there was like this shortage of brake cleaner.
Yeah.
And there was no brake cleaner in the factory anywhere.
Wow.
And the team was on stop from like every supplier because there were like unpaid bills. And like mechanics had started like keeping brake cleaner in trays, like used brake cleaner. They'd like cling film the tray and put it in their drawer so that they had some for later. You know, like, and I was like, God, like, you know, this is F1, but this is a team that was, you know, in financial trouble from
Wow.
pretty much when I joined. Like the team was in financial trouble. And then I remember my first day at Red Bull and driving onto the campus and just being like, wow, now this is Formula One. It was like a whole nother level. Like you drove into the small factory that Marussia were based in, and it was nice. It was a nice facility. It all had,
Yeah.
all the equipment we needed to build and run an F1 car. But I don't know, like when you drove into the Red Bull campus, it was like an entire village, like a town working away and all in this one project. So it was just a whole nother level. It was just, yeah.
And then from just following on from that, I mean, just in terms of just working at the pinnacle of motorsport itself, like how much sacrifice is required to work at the top level in Formula One?
Well, I mean, I think early in my career, the sacrifices were small, but they were still present, but there were sacrifices I made, because if you want to work your way up a ladder, build your network, gain skills, keep progressing, there's going to be little points where you just have to go that extra mile. There's going to be little moments where you just have to push that little bit more. Um, and like there were plenty of those early in my career, like, my first race, I slept in my car at Silverstone Circuit, little things like that. And then as you progress up the career, the sacrifices do start to get larger and larger, like now my sacrifice is obviously the time I get to spend at home with my partner and
Yeah.
my daughter. So the sacrifice now is a lot bigger, obviously, because the things that I'm sacrificing are more important. Like as a young man, trying to achieve whatever, those sacrifices were tiny. I was doing something I loved and whatever. And I'm still doing something I love, except the sacrifices I make are just a little bit bigger and they grow and grow. Obviously, we're in a long season.
Yeah.
24 race seasons, they start to take their toll. I think this year I'll be away for maybe 180 days, somewhere around that. I'll be out of the country, and it's, across time zones and stuff like that. And, sometimes you get home and you're jet lagged and it takes you a day and a half to get back. And you've only got 5 days till you go again. So it's hectic, and there are plenty of sacrifices you have to make. But it's it's about what you get out of it. For me, I think about all the things I might have missed, my friends' birthdays and things like that. And then I also think, you know what, in the last 11 years, I've been lucky enough to travel around the world 10 times. So those sacrifices are always in perspective.
Well,
And I suppose that is it. If you're following your dream, sometimes that's part of it. You have to make those sacrifices.
Yeah.
Now, for the listeners who are curious, they'll some of them may have seen you in the pit lane, but when you're not at the races, though, Callum, what does an average day look like for you?
Well, do you know what? Today's a nice day because my little one's at nursery, so I've pretty much got the day to myself. I played a bit of golf this morning. Unfortunately, I think Phoebe's gonna make me do some housework later, so I'll have to do a little bit of that. I'm got to take my little one to ballet, but it's very much a very chilled out, very relaxed schedule for me. In between races, we're quite lucky, we'll have one day we'll have to go in between a race, whether to build the car, do pit stop practice, stuff like that. So the other days, they really are rest days. Like I said, the schedule really takes it out of you. You need these rest days to sort of just get on top of stuff and also do all the things in your life that you need to get on with when you're not away. So yeah, very chilled for me in between a race now. It's a normal day.
And so with the team, then let's say you've got practice on a Friday, you've got the little like quick changes of the wheels on the Thursday, or it's a chance for the fans to come out on the circuit. So I imagine, do you guys actually end up going to the countries or the circuits on a Tuesday, or are you there like well in advance before race weekend?
Yeah, so it sort of depends, like on the long flights, like the long hauls, you tend to fly on a Tuesday and then you'll be in the garage on a Wednesday. On the Europeans, it tends to be more the case of if you've managed to build the car in the factory, you might have Tuesday off and then fly Wednesday. And then you're not in the garage until the Thursday, and that sort of helps, just shorten the weeks a little bit because you won't fly back until probably the following Monday evening. So it is still nearly a full week each event for us.
I mean, currently, wanted to ask on just how successful Red Bull are at the moment. I mean, Red Bull currently they've had so much like success in Formula One, like in recent years. I mean, you guys, Red Bull, I mean, you've just recently equaled McLaren's record of 11 straight wins in the sport, and about to Hungary next weekend, you could even beat that record with 12 race wins. But what I wanted to ask, because the Red Bull team, when you see them on watching on TV, it just looks like such like a well-oiled machine. Like when I'm watching F1 with family, we just think that there's no mistakes made with the Red Bull team at all. It just everyone just seems like so on it. But my question is like, how do you guys like maintain such high levels of performance after you've just achieved like so much in the sport?
I mean, it's a tough one, but I think more than anything, it comes down to just sort of the atmosphere. You know, like we're like you said, you know, we're sort of in a real prime zone right now. Everything's just clicking. Everything's, you know, going quite well. But I think the way that we've managed to sort of maintain that, because for me, we've managed to have that over the last couple of years. You know, I feel like we're in a real sweet spot right now as a working unit. But I guess it's more just about the atmosphere. You know, we've created quite an environment where it's not just like supportive for everyone,
Yeah.
but actually it's still pushing everyone on. You know, like the driver's performing well, and that pushes you on. You wanna get this, you wanna get that, you wanna find the next thing for you to achieve. And I feel like it's part of sort of just like the whole ethos is sort of catering towards that kind of success.
Because it was, I mean, it was just like a bit of a gap there because you guys spending like years, you know, like chasing like Mercedes and just getting closer and closer and closer, like in 2019 and 2020. So it's just, you know, like keeping the whole team motivated. And it just seems like the glue is just all gelling within the Red Bull team. So it's just knowing that you guys are, you know, just getting it closer. And it seems like all that's just paid off for you guys in that recent years as well.
That's it. I mean, like you said, you know, it's been like a process. It's been a process. It's been a build, like you said, 2019, 2020, and then pushing on and push. It's not been like it's not been one thing that's just clicked. It's been building in all the little areas and finding little bits that work, you know. And then also it's just having the right people. You know, like we've always been geared to just having the right people, not just the right people for their skills, but the right people for their personalities.
Yeah.
You know, like, and all the personalities that make up the garage are, you know, they're all conducive to having this sort of driving forward ethos of people gelling together. Is like it's an incredible, like it's a really powerful thing. You know, when you've got like that solid unit.
Yeah.
Now, Callum, you've worked for one of the most successful team bosses in Formula One, in Christian Horner. What lessons have you learned from him during your past time being as part of the Red Bull team?
Do you know what? I guess it's just to push on and do what you need to do and get it done. Like I think I don't know, one of the things I admire about Christian is obviously he was the youngest team principal the sport's ever seen. You know, Red Bull came in and they bought this team from Jaguar that weren't a massively successful outfit. And they sort of just built and built and built and turned it into this powerhouse. And like I'm sure that there were plenty of naysayers when Christian was appointed. You know, being young, that's still like a really big thing in the sport, is about age and people being in the positions they are at certain ages. It seems to still be like quite a thing. So, you know, I'm sure there were plenty of people, the naysayers at the time when he came in, and were like, oh, this young guy. And he just pushed on and he just did what he needed to do and he got it done and he built and he built and he built. And yeah, that's probably the thing that I admire most.
And then I wanted to ask Callum as well. This is more personal towards yourself in terms of your career, but what would you say is the biggest highlight of your career so far?
I mean, you know, last year, the first constructors championship that I won. You know, like bear in mind, I didn't join the team until 2015. So their successes before that, you know, I can't take any credit for. So for me, that first constructors that, you know, that I won in 22 with the team, that's probably one of my highlights. But do you know what? I've been so lucky. You know, over the last 8-9 years, I've had so many great, you know, experiences, so many firsts, you know, like breaking the pit stop world record, you know, and then going on to do it another 2 times in the next, you know, 3 weeks or whatever it was. Like these are all like things that are really, really quite amazing to be, you know, for me to be able to say that I've done. Like, and I've got those plaques that are sat up in the wall over there, and like really proud of that kind of stuff. Obviously, Max's first title, Max's second title. Like, there's so many great things that I'd never even set these goals for myself. You know, so to go on and achieve goals that you'd never even set is like, I don't know, it's quite overwhelming when you think about it. Like when I first set my first goals, my first goal was that I wanted to be a Formula One mechanic. That was it. That was just the first goal I set myself, was like, I wanted to be a Formula One mechanic. And I said to myself, I want to be on the pit crew. You know, those are my goals. So to go not only achieve both of those, but then go on and do so much more, it's a real eye opener for what sort of engineering careers can do. You know, like I never would have thought when I set out all of that time ago that I'd be able to travel the world, do all of this stuff, see some amazing places, meet some amazing people. You know? Yeah.
No, absolutely. And like, I've got 2 questions. So, talking about goals, when you set those goals, some people like to write them down, or they just make a mental prompt, this is my goals. How did you go about setting your goals? And then
Yeah.
part 2 of the question is, you know, obviously past 2 years have been very successful for Red Bull, with Max winning the titles, and he looks like he's set to win the championship again. But before that, when Red Bull weren't winning the championships, there might have been quite a number of lows during that point when you were in the team, even though they're still a successful team. You know, what gave you the motivation to keep going during those difficult times?
Well, I mean, look, in the first one, in terms of setting my goals, I was very much a mental, like I decided this is what I was going to do. I don't to write things down like that. It's not how I learn. It's sort of not how I do things anyway. I often work just in my head, but I those were the things that I remember walking down that pit lane, and I remember driving home from that race afterwards and just saying to myself, I'm going to do that as a career. You know, I looked at those guys doing that job. I've decided I'm going to learn the skills I require, and I'm going to go and find a way, and I'm going to end up doing that job. I didn't put, you know, there was no time on it. You know, there was no time stamp on it. I didn't know the industry. I didn't know what this path was going to be like. So I hadn't put a time on it, because it's very much like, you know, it's very much an industry where the opportunities really can sort of come out of nowhere. You know, that first job at Marussia came out of nowhere for me. You know, I got a phone call one day. I was doing GP3. I got a phone call one day telling me, "Oh, this is Dave O'Neill. I'm the team manager at Marussia. A friend of mine's recommended you for a job we're looking for. Would you like to come and interview for it?" You know, this was a phone call completely out of the blue, and it was because someone that I'd worked with in the past, you know, and networked with, was friends with a guy who, you know, it's an important thing, networking still in motorsport. But you know, these opportunities can come out of nowhere. So there's no point in me setting a time frame on that goal, because there was no way for me to know. In terms of the things that I did to go and achieve that goal, the answer is more than anything is I just, whatever was possible, whatever came my way, the answer was always yes. Can you do this? Yes. The answer is yes. Do you want to do this? Yes. The answer is always yes. You know, I figured it out when I got there. You know, I got that my first ever race that I did was because I went into Silverstone Circuit one day on my lunch from college, and I walked up and down the pit lane, and I asked every single team in that pit lane if I could just come and help them out from the weekend. You know, I walked up and down that pit lane. So many teams, you know, like probably the first 15 teams are just like, nah, not interested. Not interested, not interested. Okay, sorry, mate, nah, not interested. Whatever. I just kept walking down the pit lane, finding the next team. And eventually it was a really small father and son team. They were like, yeah, mate, you want to come and help out? Yeah, it'd be great. Sweet. Slept in my car for the weekend in the circuit car park, was out there running tires, doing whatever it needed doing. That was my mentality. So in terms of what did I do to achieve it, the answer was absolutely anything that would come my way.
And then, Calum, what would you say are 3 unique skills that's helped you to become as successful as you are now? If you had to give 3.
I mean, the first one is it really is sort of determination.
Yeah.
Like you said, there've been some really down days over the years. Not every day has been rosy. There've been some down days, some bad days. There were years where you're not getting the results, you can't get the performances, whatever, things aren't going that great. A little bit of grunt and a little bit of determination is obviously the first thing. The second thing I'd say is learn to take good advice when it's there.
Yeah.
Especially try and use your 2 ears, 2 eyes, 1 mouth. Listen to what's going on, see what's going on around you, listen to those who have got the experience in the industry to guide you in the right direction. And then I guess the third thing is just you need to find a way to be a little bit focused and narrow-minded almost. Like sometimes there are times where I'm doing a task and I can be, pit stops is one of them where, I can really get into a zone of focus where I can be completely oblivious to everything else that's going on around me. This is the job that I have to do right now. This is my priority. This is my focus. This is what I'm doing. So that'd be the third one is find ways for yourself to focus.
And then as a follow-up to that question, Calum, let's just say if we got a young person who dreams of wanting to work in Formula One, whether that be a mechanic or an engineer. They dream one day of working in Formula One, but let's say they don't know where to start, or let's say they don't have the connection or connections. What advice would you give to them if they wanted to start on that journey?
Well, I mean, the first bit of advice I give to everyone is you need to find some motorsport that's near you. As I said earlier, as a kid growing up in London, that was quite hard for me at the time, and I'd never found an interest in it. But what you need to do now, and thankfully there are a lot more resources out there, and people like yourselves, at the Blair Project, you need to find some sort of motorsport that is near you. And it doesn't matter what that motorsport is, I'm not talking about you need to go to the next F1 race or the next Formula E race. I'm talking about grassroots motorsport, and there's loads of it out there. Karting days like the one that we attended not long ago. Any of these events that are near you in any type of discipline or any racetrack that's near you where they have like an open session, test sessions, things like that, is you need to go and you need to see it and you need to talk to people in those environments already. Firstly, because any one of those people could be your first career opportunity. Any one of those people at an open test day, like places like Brands where I think you can pay like a £5 to walk down the paddock, and just go and talk to the teams and see the cars they're running, learn a little bit just by talking to people. Because, most of these places, they're really friendly places. Not long ago, I went and spent a day at Silverstone. There were a load of historic motors running at an open test day. And I went and we chatted to mechanics up and down the paddock. But all of this stuff, if you're starting out on a career, this is really important networking just for the beginning, just to learn about these different types of motorsport that are going on. And it doesn't matter what it is. Like I say to people, we have a national lawnmower racing association that hosts events all around the country. It's racing. It's still racing. Like you might laugh, but like I don't know if you've seen those things, but I wouldn't want to drive.
I've seen a few clips, yeah.
But this is the thing, like same as karting, it's all racing. If you can find a karting event where you can go and talk to people in the industry, like all of this stuff is key to you starting out on a career. So that's the first bit of advice I give. The next thing, and we're quite lucky now. When I started out, the National College for Motorsport, the track was one of the only places really offering qualifications in this sort of discipline. Like I did a BTEC as a race mechanic, but it wasn't a course that was like readily available anywhere else. Like now we're quite lucky. A lot more of our colleges and learning institutions are doing courses related to motorsport. So you do need to find one of those courses that you can learn the basics, learn the fundamentals, and then go on and use those skills to get yourself an apprenticeship. I'm a huge advocate for apprenticeships in
Yeah.
STEM. I think for me, I'm a kinesthetic learner. It's the only way I learn is by seeing things done and then doing them myself. That's how I learn. And it's the same when I started out at 20 or when I younger than that. It's the same then than it is now. Like, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I'm learning a skill, I have to do it. I have to do it with my hands. So apprenticeships for me are so important in STEM, because I think obviously a lot of people that take on STEM careers tend to be that way themselves. So I feel like funding for apprenticeships is really important, and I've always been a big advocate for trying to push more apprenticeships.
So Callum, if you had to say, what's the favorite thing? What's the best thing about your job?
Oh, that's a tough one. That is a tough one. When at the moment, winning. I like winning. I'm not a very good loser, so winning is always good. What's the best thing about my job?
If you had to give like an elevator pitch, 30 seconds about what's the best thing about your job.
I would have to say it's the adrenaline. For me, the best bit about my job is when you're up against it, things are tough, or out in the pit lane, about to do a pit stop, those 15, 20 seconds before the car arrives. For me, it's the adrenaline rush. That was one of the reasons I wanted to do it. That was one of the reasons that I wanted to do this job. Was I decided I wanted to do pit stops, and now it's one of my favorite things to do at work, whether it's practice or whatever. It's probably the favorite part of my job for me.
And then on that, Callum, you were mentioning earlier about, with young people, going out to different like motorsport events and whatnot. And you also mentioned about how we first met when you came down to our Proto EV STEM challenge. What was your thoughts on our Proto EV and the day itself, and some of the young people that you worked with?
Well, yeah, do you know what? More than anything, I was actually just really impressed with the young people. Like they'd done a really good job already. Like I feel like for me, especially for me, like I said, I was a late starter in it, so I know for me at that age, had you set me this challenge, I would probably not have made anywhere near the progress that they'd made when we got to that test day. So to get there and help them finalize a few little bits and minor bits and bobs was wicked to see them go out on track. It was a great day. I enjoyed myself. I had a good time. It was quite nice for me not having the glitz and glamour of the nice garage and shiny tools that I've got now, and sort of just getting my hands dirty again and getting stuck in with basic tools and equipment. I enjoyed it. It took me back to where I started. So I enjoyed the day. It was wicked.
And then, and also one of the things you were mentioning earlier was when you were getting started in motorsport, it was just like the lack of diversity. So, like back in 2020, Formula One, they made a big push with diversity in motorsport, like as a part of their We Racers One initiative. But
Yeah.
personally, Callum, do you feel enough is being done to push diversity in motorsport, particularly in Formula One?
Well, I mean, the first thing I say is, Formula One, they started a push. I think that, let's give credit where it's due. The push was started by Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
The push was started by Lewis. He did an incredible job of using his platform to speak out on something that we all knew. Like the lack of diversity in motorsport as a whole, it wasn't a secret. When I first started out, I used to talk, quite openly with my white colleagues about why were there so few black men? And the answer was that nobody knew. The answer was that nobody could really answer the question of why so few black and pursued these careers. So what Lewis did was, as well as using his platform to speak about it, what he did a great job of was actually the Hamilton Commission and that independent research to just give people the basic facts of where we're at. I think one of the problems that the industry faced at that point was that we didn't know where we were. So how do you know where you want to get to? You know, like there was no data about people who'd gone from STEM learning into motorsport. There was no data about what the makeup of the sport and the teams and none of this data was there for anyone to have any basis to work from. So the great job that Lewis did was actually funding the research so that we had, you know, the foundations of this information that we needed to then go and build projects to improve the situation. And you know, the commission made 10 recommendations to the sport, and I'm sure that, you know, throughout Formula One management and throughout the teams, you know, people are looking at these recommendations now and they're formulating where we can go and what projects we can do. But you know, let's give Lewis his credit. Without that report, we wouldn't have had that information for us to make any progress. As to whether I think that there's enough of it, I think that there's a lot of projects that are looking at ways to change the landscape, because you know there's so many different approaches, and for me personally, I'm always in favor of the approaches that simply look at breaking down the barriers, especially the early barriers, like the really basic early barriers, whether they be socioeconomic, whether they be geographic, because these are all things that lead to a lack of diversity. You know, barriers for different people, whether they be because of your gender or because of your ethnicity. You know, like there's so many different barriers for different people that you have to be careful with the projects that you put forward, in that there's no point just trying to change the end product without breaking down the barriers that are the causes. Yeah. So for me, it's all about the projects that are trying to do that. So for me, the biggest one is always going to be education. You know, like I went to a good school. I went to a good school in North London, and my school had absolutely no interest in teaching me anything really to do with engineering or, you know, mechanics or any of this stuff. Like none, like there was no real interest. In fact, my school was one of those schools that once they realized that I had no interest in going to like Oxford or Cambridge, there was really no interest. There was really very little interest from there on. So going to, you know, regardless of the fact that I was always into cars and stuff, there was no interest from the school to sort of push me towards any kind of engineering career. So yeah, like these projects now that are looking at these things, those are the ones that, you know, like for example, like the reason when you asked me if I'd be interested in going down to your Pro Tour EV challenge, the reason that I was so quick to say, yeah, I'd love to come to this, was because these are the projects that I really believe in are really going to change the landscape. You know, like kids of that age, really, this is for me where we need to be changing things and breaking down these barriers. These kids of that age, you know, like 14, 15, 16, like these are the kids that if they're going to go on to have engineering careers, you need to reach now. You know, like me, like I didn't start till I was 20. That could have gone any way, you know. But if I know that if I'd been introduced to this when I was 16, I often think, where could I be in my career now? You know, like how much further down this path could I be?
Yeah.
So like those are the projects that I think are really important.
So, Blair, we've had our first black driver. We've now got black engineers in the pit lane. Could we be looking at our first black team principal right here? And if so, Calum, is that something that you set yourself as a goal maybe in the next 5 to 10 years? Is that something you're even considering? Or where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years?
Mate, it's a tough one, you know, like if you're going to go on to pursue things like that, then that's, you know, that's a lifetime commitment you make to the paddock and to traveling. And those are all like obviously huge decisions. So I wouldn't say it's a goal I've set myself. I don't see it as an impossibility either. What I do right now is I'm just purely focused on the very short term, each win, each race, you know, like I feel like that's the best sort of place for me to be at this point in my career. You know, each championship, and we just keep moving on to the next and the next, and we'll see where we're at and see where life goes.
So I think what we're going to do now, Calum, is that we're going to go into the fun part of the podcast where we ask you
Right.
3 bonus questions. I just want to let you know that the first question I do judge all my guests on. So if you don't give me the answer that I like, then we're just gonna we won't bother going to the second and third question. No, I'm
No
just joking.
pressure.
I'm just joking. But we'll go into this one anyway. Does pineapple belong on a pizza?
Absolutely not.
Thank God. There we go. That's this podcast.
I mean, I
fantastic now.
can't even believe it. I can't even believe you answered that. What kind of person?
The last guest said that pineapple does belong in a pizza, but I'd have to go to Ghana to try the pineapples there because they might taste great on a pizza.
No,
But no, pineapple does not belong on a pizza. Right. The second one is if you could throw a dinner party tomorrow and you can invite 4 guests and they can either be dead or alive, which 4 guests would you invite to your dinner party?
Wow, that's a tough one. Do you know what? Do you know what? One of the first ones would actually be Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson. Do you know what? After reading Mike Tyson's autobiography, like what a life. From nothing to stardom to bankruptcy to ruin, and to rebuild his life. Like, what a story. So I think Mike could have to be on my list.
Was that the Undisputed Truth, that book?
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, I've read that as well.
It's a great book. So yeah, Mike would be number one. The second one would be Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle for sure, man. Like, I feel like a dinner with Dave Chappelle would be one of those dinners where your face would just be hurting by the end of it. It kind of reminds me of my dad weirdly as well. So it's like, fine. I love Dave Chappelle. The other two, I'd have to have someone from the world of music. And I think it'd actually be Amy Winehouse. I'd quite like to have she'd be a great laugh. And as long as she could sing as well, that'd be perfect. And then the final one is very tough. But I'd have Jules Bianchi. Obviously being one of the mechanics on Jules' car back in 2013, 2014. We still miss him a great deal. And it'd be great to just be able to sit and have dinner with Jules.
Great selection. Like, I'm sure you probably wouldn't make it to dinner because Dave Chappelle would be busting jokes like every minute. The food probably gone cold by the time it comes out. No, but great selection there. And then the last question is, and I'm sure you've traveled to lots of countries, working in the world of Formula One. Where has been the most interesting place you've traveled to, and why?
That's a good one. I tell you what, in terms of interesting, I love Japan. Like, I love Japan. Japan, and to be fair, Singapore as well, are two of my favorite races on the calendar. Japan, just because the culture's amazing. Like, I love it. Where we are as well. Like, I love the culture that the whole thing's sort of built on respect and honor and dignity, and everyone's polite, and people don't litter. I don't know, man. I feel like if the rest of the world was a little bit more Japanese about stuff, the world would probably be a much better place. So I really like Japan, and then Singapore just for the place, like the architect, these ridiculous skyscrapers and an entire network of underground tunnels and car parks and shopping malls. Like, you can walk across like half the city without seeing daylight in Singapore. Like, it's all connected underground. Yeah, like, it's so like we can walk to the track, like from like the hotel to the circuit. You can walk the whole way underground in air conditioning. It's lovely. But it's just like an amazing, like all the car parks underground are connected. You can drive around the city under there. It's really cool.
And how long does that take you from the hotel then to
Oh,
the circuit?
it's like a 15-20 minute walk.
Wow.
But it's better than doing it out in the baking heat.
Yeah, true. Is it
So,
is it still extremely hot at night?
huh?
Is it extremely hot at night?
Yeah, it's still like ridiculously humid. Yeah.
Oof. Oof.
So yeah, I like Singapore and Japan.
And where is the Japanese Grand Prix? Is it? It's nowhere near
Suzuka.
Tokyo. It's Suzuka.
I think the bullet train takes you like, I don't know, an hour or two, like something like that. It's not a million miles away, and the train's obviously ridiculously fast.
Yeah, I wish this whole HS2. I wish we had just the bullet trains like the Japanese. But that's a topic for another time, another rant. No, but Calum, thank you.
I like the food in Japan as well. The good thing about that's the other thing about Japan, like the food's good. You can eat well there, like good fried chicken, all the best stuff in Japan.
I've been meaning.
I've always wanted to go to Japan myself. Yeah,
you should.
It's just for the last 2 years.
It's just, you know what, to sort of get out of what you're used to. Like even when you travel around Europe, nothing's that different. When you get to Japan, like everything seems so different, and it's just quite nice. It's refreshing.
Right, Blair, we're booking it.
Let's get it sorted. Yeah.
October. Let's go out.
Go and spend a week in Tokyo.
I've heard a lot of good things, but it's a proper like party city though. Depends on the districts that you end up going to. It's different. That's all I can say. But we shall see. But Calum, thank you so much for being a guest on the See Me Be Me podcast.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's been one of the most fun episodes that we've done. So no, really appreciate it. And before I forget, if people want to follow you on your journey and find out more, where can people go in terms of any social channels or anything that you want to plug? Keep up to date.
You can get me on Instagram and Twitter at F1Mech. That's it. You can follow me, and I'll show you how life's going every now and
again. Excellent. All right, then, everybody, take care and see you on the next exciting episode of the See Me Be Me podcast. Laters.
See you guys. Have a good one.
Wow, guys, what another amazing episode. And once again, I found Calum's story just very inspiring. As a big Formula One and motorsport fan myself, I feel Calum's particularly inspiring because I feel he's opened up so many doors for young people, particularly from BAME backgrounds, to see their possibilities within himself. I mean, similar to how people, let's say, view Lewis Hamilton as a driver who's opened up doors as a racing driver, I feel the same way when I see Calum on the TV, as he's one of the most recognizable faces in the industry. And I also just like how his story and how he originally got involved in motorsport. Started at Silverstone, and he was just going around to all the grassroots teams at the time and just speaking to them and just networking and just asking them if there's roles available. And it just goes to show again that if you want something bad enough, you have to go and make it happen. You have to go out there, you network, speak to people, build on relationships, and eventually something will happen from you just going out there and selling yourself and just letting people know that you're available, you have a hobby, you have a passion, you have an interest, and then eventually someone will come along and invest in you and invest in your career and help you work up that ladder. So, which obviously helped Calum work his way up to the areas such as Formula One. And it's also just he was mentioning that in terms of motorsport, just go to your local racetrack or karting track and just get a feel for it and just speak to the people there. And you never know, just from having those conversations and networking, where those different opportunities will lead to. And it's similar to ourselves. It's like when we're going to events, it's just all about your networking, and it's almost, to an extent, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So from building your connections and speaking to people, you just getting your name known out there, and more people are going to hear about you. And if someone likes you, they'll end up giving. You find if someone likes you, they'll end up giving you an opportunity just from speaking with you. So if you want something bad enough, just make sure to just go out there and just let people know that you're available. And I just found that really inspiring, just hearing his like stories from essentially not knowing anyone in the industry to working his way up from the bottom all the way to the pinnacle of Formula One itself in a Red Bull F1 team. And then I guess to go on with his career in Formula One with the Red Bull team, I really like how he was saying that they have that winning mentality where he's saying he doesn't like to lose. And you can almost see that in the Red Bull team. It's like what I was mentioning to Calum, that the entire team just seems like they're on it. They just all just seem like they know what they're doing. It's like a well-run, structured team. And they've all got like that winning mindset. And it's just to the point now where Red Bull in Formula One right now, they've just they've just set a record equaling McLaren's 11 straight wins in the sport, and they're currently like dominating the field. No doubt they're going to win the drivers and the constructors championships for Formula One this year, and they're just smashing the competition this year. And it just goes to show that if you have a whole team with the winning mindset, that winning mindset becomes a part of your mentality, and you'll just go on to achieve great things. So this is just like one of the qualities needed to obviously mix when you with the best of the best, particularly in a career like Formula One. It takes a winning mindset, and that's what it truly takes, honestly, not just in Formula One, but just in life and business in general. You need to have that winning mindset if you want to excel in anything at life. And it truly shows in the work that Calum and the Red Bull team have done. They've, they had those years when they was chasing the Mercedes team after they had Red Bull had the success in 2013. They had the 7 years where they're just chasing the Mercedes team. And now with all that hard work and determination from that team, they're now reaping the rewards of that success. And they're currently dominating the sport. So it just goes to show with Calum's mentality and with the mentality of the team that if you've got enough people around you with the right mindset, anything is possible. But just to end off, it was great to have Calum on the podcast today. We previously met. He mentioned earlier he came down to our first test day of our Proto EV STEM Challenge earlier this year, where young people convert used petrol go-karts into fully electric e-karts, where they test and race to see which is the fastest and most energy efficient. And his presence there was inspiring our young people to get their karts finished before they went out on track. And once again, it's always just a pleasure to talk to Calum and just hear his stories on, going through the grassroots of motorsport to where he is now. And it would be great in the future, maybe in a year or two, to have him back on the podcast and see where his journey, where he is with his journey in the world of motorsport. But as I say, please do make sure to follow Calum's journey on his social media platforms, Formula One Mech on Twitter and Instagram. And if you have enjoyed today's episode, please like, comment, and subscribe. We are across all major social media platforms, so you can listen to us on Apple Music and Spotify. You can also follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube at The Blair Project. And you can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Get Me Motoring. Just a final word from myself. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And until next time, peace out.
If you've liked today's episode, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. The Blair Project is on all major social media platforms, including Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube at The Blair Project. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Yes, we are on TikTok at Get Me Motoring. If you'd like to follow myself individually, I am on Instagram at Nile Henry and also LinkedIn at Nile Henry as well.
And if you want to follow myself, I'm on Instagram as BlairHenry_97 and also on LinkedIn as just Blair Henry.
So we look forward to having you on the next episode. So stay tuned. Take care.
Until next time.